I'm going to just go ahead now and get started. I want to welcome you all to Chapter and Notes, Winter of Our Discontent by John Steinbeck. My name is Stacey Goldring, and nothing gives me more pleasure than to talk about books. What is the context for today's book, The Winter of Our Discontent? Let me go ahead and kind of give you, I love the 30,000 foot view, so we're going to start from there. Actually, the Winter of Our Discontent refers to several things. In U.S. history, it was a time period between 1950 and 1952, roughly coinciding with the Korean War. In the UK, Winter of Our Discontent refers to the winter of 78-79, a time of widespread strikes. And of course, now is the winter of our discontent is a famous line from Shakespeare's play, Richard III. It is impossible for us in our time together today to cover all the incredible analysis about winter. If you've joined us for East of Eden, or if you've joined us for Cannery Row, or I think we did Grapes of Wrath, but my memory, I can't remember. We have gone into great detail of Steinbeck's bio, his writing style, etc. But no matter, even if you read East of Eden, you will have a mythical idea of his background. But for today, in order to tackle this huge author and this book, I have decided to let the bard be our guide under the guise of the protagonist, King Richard III. But have no fear, unlike Richard III, our time together today, as we said, will be full of content and content, a much needed reprieve compared to what's happening out there in the world. And as we begin, I want to remind everyone that I welcome all your brilliant brainiac ideas that you bring to the discussion. It's what makes our discussion incredibly important and special. But I ask you to leave your worries, the political mishigas, your family headaches, your complaints about work, kids, you name it, at the door, because like I said, what's important is your brain and what you thought of the book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deconstruct discontent using the 3 R's: relevancy, reliance, and renewal. So as I go through this analysis, I want you to think about these 3 R's in relation to your own reading experience of winter, about the plot, which I'll briefly discuss, the characters, which I will dive into, and then your takeaway. And I'll also hopefully be sharing themes and quotes from our country's most incredible authors. So I want to go ahead and get started. And why not get started with the best? So I'm going to go ahead and play a clip from Sir Ian McKellen's interpretation of the Duke of Gloucester saying those very famous lines.
Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York.
Okay, first of all, could you all hear it? Oh my gosh, I'm already 100% ahead of the game. I hope you enjoyed the discussion of chapter. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so that was Sir Ian McEwan's Winter. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a clip of him explaining the relevancy of this line. This is about a 1-minute clip.
So now, what a wonderful first word. Right at the beginning of the play. Now. Not in the past, not a history play. Now. So what's going to happen now? Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer. Now is the winter of our discontent. Well, we've been having a terrible time in England. The discontent has led to civil wars. And Richard is suggesting that feels like winter, when everything's rather uncomfortable. But now it's glorious summer because the sun has come out. But here we are. Here's a pun. Sun is a pun. It means two things. It means the sun in the sky, but the son of York is the S-O-N. And the child of York, the House of York, who have been fighting in the civil wars. And so here Richard's referring to his elder brother, Edward, Duke of York, who's now become King Edward IV.
Okay. If this was a 5-minute book discussion, we could end it right there, because this description really ties up everything about the theme of the book, the relevancy to it today, and Steinbeck's theme, which is this idea of capturing the now, capturing what's going on now. When he wrote the book, what's going on in the microcosm of Ethan's life, how it reflects the world. The relevancy today is not lost, at least on me. Steinbeck lays bare what's going on in New Baytown through the eyes of Ethan, who pretty much just tells it like it is. Ethan is Steinbeck. He captured the now of America with all its ambiguities. It's that I think it's something that we struggle with daily every time we turn on the news. At the time that this was published, winter was underappreciated by many critics in America in general, despite its winning the Nobel that same year. And lots of complaints were about the fact that these reviewers, this is why don't trust any reviewers. First of all, at this point in my life, they're all too young. So they're young and dumb. Okay. But also, they didn't understand his philosophy. They didn't understand what he was trying to do. And this happens all the time with art. We can't appreciate the art till we have this priceless perspective called time. And if we don't have time to see things clearly, we can't appreciate them. And this is why America could not appreciate winter when it came out. Now, moving on to the second R, which is reliance. This book is quintessential Steinbeck because of its reliance on the Bible, literature, a religious text, myth. Again, time will not permit us to explore all of the books, but just to mention a few. King Arthur, the King James Bible. I'm going to botch this pronunciation, but Boethius, I know that someone will correct me, Melville, Thomas Paine, and Hans Christian Andersen, which who knew? I was so delighted to see him refer to Hans Christian Andersen because we will be reading Little Mermaid in just a few short months. So this list of literary heavyweights goes on and on. Winter of Our Discontent is a lifelong manifestation of Steinbeck's love of these works that come out in this book. So I feel, again, it is only fitting that we rely on Shakespeare's quote to guide us through our discussion of Steinbeck's last novel. And an interesting aside, I fall down many rabbit holes when I do my research. And I found this article written in 1972 that totally criticizes Steinbeck and his translations, which they say that he completely botched, going back to East of Eden's Tim Shell. I don't know if you remember that, thou mayest, the idea that we have free will, free choice. So there are scholars that say he botched that, and he also botched a lot of the quotes, and our Aunt Deborah's quotes, who she seems to be a scholar in Anglo-Saxon language. But anyway, he got a lot of, I think they call that throwing shade. I don't know. Anyway, he was criticized for that, but that's for another time. So with Spring in the Air, I want to go on to the third idea of Steinbeck's theme in this book, which is renewal. And I'm sorry if you hear Coco snoring in the background. That's she's not impressed with this discussion. Okay, so now is the winter of our discontent. And let's now look at the next part of that line, which is made glorious by the son of York. Although this is not included in the title of the book, this next line lays Easter eggs. If we just analyze it a bit, it tells us the clues about this tragedy, or comedy, you tell me, that are revealed about Ethan. And Sir Ian McKellen talks about this pun that Shakespeare uses when referring to the word son. The son represents hope and renewal. The son as in the Son of God. The son as in the inheritor. So who is the son in Steinbeck's Winter? Who is your son? Who is our son? Ethan carries his heritage, his past, right in front of his face all the time. It's always there. And the question at the end of the book is whether Ethan can ever be renewed, reborn, or resurrected. Can he leave behind his past actions? Can he forge ahead, cleansed, baptized, renewed? It is no accident that this book takes place during Good Friday, Easter, 4th of July, incidentally, the same time period in which Steinbeck wrote this book. So I want to just take a bit of a deeper look into the background of Winter and broaden our understanding of this story. So I ask, what is the purpose of Winter? The next slides, I'll be pleased to bring you some interesting visuals and quotes from the book. So why not take a little look at John Steinbeck barbecuing? That was kind of cute. Okay, so why even write this book? He was incredibly successful. He had a great run, obviously financially secure. He was on his third marriage and a happy one at that. And we know this because of how he refers to how Ethan refers to Miss Mousy, Mary, in the book. He used some of these terms. He called Elaine some of these things. He wrote this book telling friends in his letters that he wanted to address the moral degeneration of American culture between the 1950s and 60s. And he, quote, meant to shake a reader's complacency. Were you shaken at all by reading this book? So Winter represents Steinbeck's, this is a quote taken from Susan Schillinghall's intro, and I had an edition from 1982. So it says that Steinbeck's profound unease with Cold War America, where his real fear for country centered not on Sputnik or the Russian armament, but his creeping operative nerve gas of immorality, which starts in the nursery and does not stop before it reaches the highest offices, both corporate and governmental. Schillinghall goes on. John Steinbeck felt the freedom to critique one's country was the role of an artist in a free nation. This is chilling. These are chilling words from this introduction because of what's going on in our world right now. Ethan's voice as John Steinbeck is stating the truth as it unfolded in front of his eyes in the 1950s and now. Briefly, so briefly, I'm going to now just go over the plot in case you have not had time to read it, because like I always say about our book discussion, you do not have to read the book in order to participate in the discussion. So we're all on the same page, excuse the pun. Ethan Hawley is bitter about his family's loss of status and wealth. He ruminates about his short straw that he's drawn in life while stuck as a grocery store clerk in a store once owned by his family. The Harvard grad and Korean vet is pretty much honest, but after seeing and hearing how others are getting ahead with less than stellar moral compass, Ethan conjures plans from the dark side, robbing a town bank, having his employer, Alfio Marullo, deported, and his childhood friend Danny Taylor's land taken away from him, and worse. His scheming, stripped from any moral code that even Ayn Rand would disapprove, leads down a slippery slope of immutable events triggered by his choices of action or failure to stand up and say something and stop it. In the end, we see Ethan as a person who believes he is reborn. Is his belief the reality? When someone asks you, what are you reading? And you tell them Winter of Our Discontent, and they ask you, what is this book about? What is your response? Before you answer, it's good to know a bit about each of our characters in this play, morality play, which I think would have done much better on the stage of the Globe as opposed to a TV miniseries that was done starring Donald Sutherland back in 1983. I'm not even going to watch it because I don't want to be poisoned, but it exists and it's free on YouTube if you want to watch it. Okay. So as his name suggests, Ethan Allen Hawley is descended from a line of early pioneering Americans, and like his ancestors, he's an independent spirit, discontented with his lot, but trying to get on. And I love how he addresses the canned pears and peaches, described as the library of the stomach. Early in the book, he addresses them as if he is standing and addressing his flock. Hear me, O ye canned peaches and pears, ye pickles, ye piccalilli. As soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and scribes came together and let him into their council as soon as it was day. The buggers went to work early, didn't they? They didn't waste no time, no how. Why does Ethan talk this way? What is it about this satirical style? These verbal exercises are a way for him to come to terms with his low fortunes and serve as a contradictory impulse to his real life buried frustrations. We all know cynics, snide, witty people who were really not quite sure if they're telling the truth, being merely witty or mean. We call it passive aggressive. So Ethan is a contradiction who eventually succumbs to corruption. He has been compared to Hamlet because of his self-doubt deepening by the corruption all around him. And this corruption is inherited by the son. He likes to tell his son about the old-fashioned virtues of honesty and independence. He turns down a bribe by a salesman, at first anyways. He sees himself as Christ-like in trying to help Danny, but being betrayed. And then there is the name, Ethan Allen. So it's only fitting that we have a bit of background on him because he encaptures more than just a furniture store. So briefly, he was, depending on your source, American Revolutionary War patriot, author, politician, and trader. It was with Benedict Arnold that he led the Green Mountain Boys to capture Fort Ticonderoga from the British in 1775. He petitioned to make Vermont a state, but the Continental Congress denied him. So he conspired with Britain to make Vermont a part of Canada. He was accused of treason. His guilt was never proven, but he did go to prison, spending 2 years in a Cornwall prison. Okay, leaving the ambiguous American history behind, let's return to Miss Mousy. Ethan's wife is loving, caring, I'd say a little ditzy, although Margie says otherwise. She puts pressure on Ethan to make money and restore status in town. It is Alan's children that really interests me. Ethan's son gives us access to the corrupt popular culture in America in the 1950s. Let me just get to that slide about the quiz shows. The quiz show scandals were a series of revelations that contestants of several quiz shows were secretly given assistance by producers to impress the ratings. And this is what exactly why the son enters the contest. He's not doing it for love of country, but rather to gain materialistic rewards like a new watch, a trip, and appearing on TV. When Alan tries to instill the values of his family heritage to his son, it's a very interesting exchange. It begins on page 71, and he tells Alan, they were giants of the earth in those days. And Alan responds, I wished I would have lived then. Pirate ships, oh boy, bang, bang, strike your colors, pots of gold, ladies in silk. I sure wish I lived them. Some of our folks did it. You said so yourself. And then Ethan replies, these people were a kind of genteel piracy. They called them privateers. It's bigger and better organized now. They call it diplomacy. Okay, now we come to what I feel is an enigma, and that is the daughter. There's a great quote on page 191, I think that struck me. He says, go in peace, my love, even though during this time, we can't stand each other. It refers to bringing up teenagers. I'm just not sure what to make of this girl. Is she an Ethan Jr.? Does she turn, she does turn in her brother for cheating. Is that good? Is that bad? Is she like Ethan, a Judas, a traitor? She's doing what her father did to Murillo. And her sleepwalking, her caressing of the talisman can leave a reader wondering, is Steinbeck imbuing her with some type of mystical property? Is she an angel? Is she a witch? Perhaps she's akin from a character in one of Steinbeck's favorite books. I don't know. Is it just a little too creepy, his depiction of her for today's lens? And related, in Schillinglaw's intro, she informs us that the storyline originally had incest in it between the siblings. This was eliminated clearly in the Winter's final form. And then in Ethan's final scene in his Lazarethan cave, do you find redeeming qualities in his daughter then? Quote, and as the talisman was important and still is to me, so it is to Ellen. Maybe it is Ellen who will carry and pass on whatever is immortal in me. At the end of the story, because of the talisman that Mary Ellen slips in his pocket, Ethan is presented with the choice, a very Steinbeckian choice. He tells us, I had to get back. I had to return the talisman to its new owner. Is this the daughter? Is it the next generation? According to a book club I watched on YouTube that was rather dated, there was a gentleman who explained that it had to be the son because the daughter was of no consequence. This brings us to Margie Young Hunt. The name given to the characters of Winter are incredibly telling. Margie from Margaret, French for pearl. Young Hunt, not Hunt Young. Why? Marjorie was once young and now she is on the hunt. Her name would not work in the reverse. She is our seductress, our witch, our reader of tarot cards. And I actually looked up the brand of cards that the tarot cards, the box that they were concealed in, and I found them for sale on Etsy. And so there's what the box would have looked like. That's the name of the company. And then there's just some pictures of tarot cards on the right. She's a divorcee attracted to Ethan, a self-proclaimed witch, part fraud, part confident. She is not that young any longer, surviving on alimony checks that will soon stop. Perhaps she sees Ethan as a new source of income. God bless her, the woman's an opportunist. She predicts Ethan will come into money. And then Steinbeck inserts a Latin phrase on free will. I'm going to botch the Latin. Astro inclinant sed non obligant, which means the stars incline, they do not command. She also kind of captures Steinbeck's view of women, which I thought was interesting. He said, Margie liked Mary very much, and she had little sympathy and no pity for her. Misfortune is a fact of nature acceptable to women, especially when it falls on other women. However, it was the description on page 147 that you'll just have to indulge me, because I was blown away. I had to read it out loud, and now I will subject you to it, because this is a man who transports us to standing behind Margie in her little apartment as we look into her makeup mirror. And then, as only an omniscient narrator can do, he starts. And her tiny, immaculate house, set in a large, overgrown garden very near Old Harbor. She leaned toward the makeup mirror to inspect her tools, and her eyes saw through the cream, powder, eyeshadowing, the lashes sheathed in black, saw the hidden wrinkles, the elasticity of the skin. She felt the years creep up like a rising tide on a rock in a calm sea. There is an arsenal of maturity in middle age, but these require training, technique she did not yet have. She must learn them before her structure of youth and excitement crumble and left her naked, rotten, ridiculous. Her success had been that she never let it down, even alone. Now, as an experiment, she allowed her mouth to droop as it wanted to, her eyelids to fall to half staff. She lowered her high-held chin, and a plaited rope came into being. Before her in the mirror, she saw 20 years clamber over her as she shuddered as the icy whispering told her that they are waiting. She had delayed too long. A woman must have a showcase in which to grow old. Lights, props, black velvet, children, graying and fattening, snickering and pilfering, love, protection, and small change. A serene and undemanding husband, or even more serene and less demanding will and trust fund. A woman growing old alone is useless cast of trash, a wrinkled obscenity with no hobbled retainers to cluck and mutter over her aches and to rub her pains. That was pretty powerful. Moving on to Mr. Baker. To me, he was an amalgam of Gordon Gekko and Mr. Potter. Okay. He is Old Town's banker. From the beginning pages of the book, teeing up our meeting with Mr. Baker, utilizing Steinbeckian naturalism and prose, we know that darkness is ahead because of the birds. Halfway down the first block, a delinquent gang of English sparrows were fighting on the new coming law of the Elgar house, not playing, but rolling and picking and eye gouging with such ferocity and so loudly that they didn't see Ethan approach. This is Darwinism. This is the Ed Ricketts influence on his life. Even something as innocent as the birds have been corrupted, this foreshadowing in the first pages of the novel. Our Mr. Baker is no offense, Elise, is a symbol of corruption of the good old boys network, Blue budded from birth and baked over generations into a life of wealth and status. He precludes the 1980 maxim that greed is good long before Gordon Gekko and his suspended morality became a representation of America's acceptable and worshipped religion of ruthless capitalism. And that is a direct quote from Ethan Hawley's Ghost, who I interviewed in preparation for the discussion. I'm just kidding. Mr. Baker embodies in character and dialogue the concern Steinbeck had for our moral decay, as mentioned at the beginning. When discussing Ethan's financial situation, right away we see the themes of xenophobia and otherism right there on the page. 14. If you turn to page 14, quote, "I went under all right. It's the first time in history a Holly was ever a clerk in a Guinea grocery." And Mr. Baker responds, "Now that's what I don't understand, Ethan. Anybody can go broke. What I don't see is why you have to stay broke. A man of your family and background and education, it doesn't have to be permanent unless your blood lost its guts. There are opportunities our ancestors never dreamed of, and they're being picked up by foreigners. Foreigners are taking over, Ethan. Wake up." Going back to relevancy. This profound exchange rings personally true. I think it is incredible how Steinbeck can tap into the fear of someone who has been labeled the other. Mr. Baker may have been responsible for the ruin of Ethan's family's fortune. His advice to invest Mary's money is really an attempt to profit much more for himself. With Mr. Baker, we see themes that run throughout Steinbeck's work, making us question what is really good, what is really evil. Do the ends justify the means? I mean, let's face it, Mr. Baker is providing a wonderful life for his family and for the community. And he even claims that his wife is a wonderful reader because she reads something called Great World Books, some type of subscription book. On page 187, Steinbeck opines through Ethan on what he defines as success. Most of the world thinks success is never bad. Strength and success, they are above morality, above criticism. It seems then that it is not what you do, but how you do it and what you call it. There is a check in men deep in them that stops or punishes. The only punishment is for failure. In effect, no crime is committed unless a criminal is caught. Our oldest and most often disproved myths is that a man's thoughts show in his face, that his eyes are the windows to the soul. This isn't so. Only sickness shows, or defeat, or despair, which are different kinds of sickness. As we watch Ethan succumb to corruption, he says things like, "To conceal your motives, tell the truth." That is another quote taken from the Latin. Or, "A crime is something someone else commits." Or, "What you can cover up doesn't exist."